What's the biggest promise your parents broke? Story 1. Growing up, my mother made one sacred vow after my father's affair tore our family apart. She looked me in the eyes with tears streaming down her face and promised she would never put me through that kind of pain. For years, she was my rock, my moral compass, the person who taught me that cheating was the ultimate sin. I believed her completely. When my marriage started getting rocky and my husband became emotionally distant, she was the first person I confided in about my fears that he might be having an affair. She held me while I cried, reassuring me that everything would be okay. Last Tuesday, I decided to surprise my husband by coming home early from work. I had flowers and his favorite takeout, thinking maybe a romantic gesture could fix whatever was wrong between us. The front door was unlocked. I could hear sounds coming from upstairs, but what I discovered in my bedroom wasn't just my husband with another woman. It was my husband with my mother. The woman who swore she'd never put me through this pain was actively causing it in the most devastating way possible. The same person who held me while I worried about infidelity was the reason for my suspicions all along. She had been manipulating both of us, playing the supportive mother while destroying my marriage from the inside. But here's the part that still makes my head spin. My father, the man she painted as the ultimate villain, the cheater who destroyed our family, is now the only person helping me pick up the pieces. He's helping me pack, hiring my divorce lawyer, and showing me the kind of unconditional support I thought only existed in my mother. The woman who taught me to hate cheaters became the very monster she warned me about, and the man she taught me to despise is proving to be the parent I actually needed. Story 2. My mom swore she'd always protect me. When I was 12, my stepdad hit me for the first time. I showed her the bruise and she promised it would never happen again. She said she'd leave him, but we stayed. The hitting got worse and her promises kept coming. Just one more month until we save enough to move. Years passed this way. On my 16th birthday, he broke my arm. In the ER, Mom whispered, "Tonight we leave for good." I believed her. That night I packed a small bag and waited by my window. 2 a.m. came, then 3. At 4 I heard their bedroom door. Finally, I thought, but it wasn't Mom coming to get me. It was him. He smiled and said, "Your mom told me everything. She chose me, kid." I ran away that morning. Stayed with a teacher who noticed my bruises. She helped me file for emancipation. I finished high school living in her spare room, then worked and saved for college. 10 years passed without a word from Mom. Then last month I got a call from a hospital. Mom was dying from cancer, wanted to see me. I almost didn't go, but I did. She was tiny in that hospital bed. She cried when she saw me, said she was sorry. Then she asked if I could forgive her. I sat quietly, then asked why she chose him over me. "Because I was scared," she whispered, "and weak." I nodded and told her I forgave her. I held her hand until she fell asleep. Then I left a note by her bed that said, "I lied too." Story 3. When I was 7, my mom promised we'd always be a family. Then on my graduation day, she revealed she'd been living a double life with another family for 12 years. My childhood was picture perfect from the outside. Mom was the PTA president, Dad ran his accounting firm, and I was the straight-A student everyone praised. "We're the luckiest family," Mom would say, kissing my forehead at night, "and we'll always be together, I promise." Mom traveled often for her pharmaceutical sales job. 3 days every 2 weeks, she'd return with small gifts: a snow globe from Chicago, chocolate from Philadelphia, a keychain from Boston. I kept them all on a special shelf. Dad and I had our own rituals during her trips. We'd order pizza, watch sci-fi movies she hated, and eat ice cream straight from the container. "Don't tell your mother," he'd wink. As I entered high school, I noticed changes. Mom missed my debate championship for a work emergency. Her trips stretched to 4 days, sometimes 5. When I asked about visiting her, she'd quickly change the subject. "Sales conferences are boring, sweetie." Still, our family functioned. Mom helped me craft the valedictorian speech I'd deliver at graduation. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "Nothing is more important to me than being your mother." Graduation day arrived with perfect weather. My speech earned a standing ovation. At our celebration dinner, Mom excused herself to take a call. When she returned, her face was ashen. "We need to go home," she said. "There's something I need to tell you both." The drive home was silent. In our living room, surrounded by graduation balloons, Mom paced before sitting down. "There's been an accident," she began, voice trembling. "Jason is in the hospital." Dad frowned. "Who's Jason?" Mom's eyes closed briefly. "My son, my other son." The room tilted. I gripped the couch as Mom revealed the truth. For 12 years she'd been living a parallel life in Boston. She had another husband, Richard, and 2 children, Jason, 11, and Emma, 9. Her business trips were actually time with her other family. Now Jason had been injured in a bike accident, and she couldn't hide anymore. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she whispered. I loved both my lives. Both my families. Dad sat frozen with shock. I stared at the shelf of trinkets from her trips. Souvenirs of her betrayal. So every time you said I love you, I couldn't finish. I meant it, Mom insisted. I've always loved you. I just love them too. That night Mom packed and left for Boston. Dad moved through the house like a ghost, removing her photos, boxing her clothes. I locked myself in my room reading through old birthday cards, searching for clues I'd missed. The story exploded across our town. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors stared. Dad started drinking. I deferred college, unable to focus beyond one question. How could someone live two completely separate lives for 12 years? 6 months later, I received a letter from Emma. Mom talks about you all the time, she wrote. Enclosed was a photo of her, Jason, and their father, a family that mirrored my own in unsettling ways. Last week, 3 years later, Mom called. Jason was graduating high school now. She wanted me to meet my siblings. We could still be a family, she said. A different kind, but still family. I listened silently, then told her I had to go. Those promises need someone who understands that some promises aren't meant to be kept. Story 4. It started on a dark country road, in the pouring rain. When I was 17, there was this sickening thud, then the sound of tires screaming on wet asphalt. My car spun out and stalled. My heart stopped. I thought I'd hit someone. A shadow. A person who had run out from the darkness. Panicked, I called the only person I thought could save me, my dad. He showed up, his face unnervingly calm in the chaos. He looked at me, at the empty road, and put his hands on my shoulders. He promised he would handle everything, that he would make it go away so my future wouldn't be ruined. That promise was a lifeline, and I clung to it. The next day, he sat me down and explained. He said he'd convinced my best friend, Mark, to take the fall. Mark had a minor record, my dad argued, and another smudge on his name was better than destroying my bright future entirely. He'd paid Mark's family a large sum of money. I felt this crushing, gut-wrenching guilt, a stone in my stomach. I'd let my best friend go to prison to save myself. For 10 years, I lived with that. I secretly sent Mark money every month, wrote letters that never got a response. I was haunted by nightmares. My dad's promise had saved me from a jail cell, but it locked me in a private hell of guilt, and I thought that was the broken promise, that he'd made me a monster to protect me. But the truth was a million times worse. Last year, Mark got out. We met in a dingy coffee shop. He looked older, tired. After a long, awkward silence, he looked me dead in the eye and delivered the words that shattered my world. I hadn't hit anyone. I had hit a deer. Ice shot through my veins as he continued. After I'd called that night, my dad had come, but he was drunk. After he took me home, he drove back out to that road, probably to clear the deer, but he didn't see the cyclist. He hit him. My father had merged the two accidents into one. My crash was the perfect cover. My panic was the perfect excuse for him to manipulate. His promise wasn't to protect me. It was to protect himself. He used me, and he used my best friend, to cover up his own vehicular manslaughter. I walked out of that coffee shop in a fog. His words about making it go away echoed in my head, and for the first time in 10 years, I knew what I had to do. I pulled out my phone, but I didn't call my father. I called the police. He promised he'd make it go away, and I did. I made him go away. Story 5. My parents told me they were saving money for my college. They said it was locked away in a fund just for me. So I grew up believing it. Anytime I asked why we didn't do family trips, or why I couldn't get new clothes like the other kids, they always reminded me that everything extra was going toward my future. So I trusted them and didn't complain. I worked hard, studied a lot, and focused on grades instead of fun. I even skipped prom and took the long way through life, all because I believed I was being set up for success. But my last year of high school came and I got accepted into a good state college. Not super fancy, but I felt proud. It was time to use the college fund my parents had talked about for over a decade. But when I brought it up, they told me the money was gone, and they didn't explain much. Just that life had been expensive and things changed. So I stood there shocked, because they acted like it wasn't a big deal. They told me I'd figure it out, and lots of people paid for college alone, and I was smart enough to handle it. But I didn't know what to say because I'd given up years of opportunities because I believed in that fund, and I had no backup plan. I hurried to apply for student loans and picked up 2 part-time jobs. I stayed up late studying, worked weekends, and lived on instant noodles and discount groceries. At first I thought that was the worst of it, but a few months later, I went to a family barbecue because I hadn't seen everyone in a while, even though I didn't feel like it. I was by the drink cooler when I heard my cousin bragging to her mom about her new look. She listed off the plastic surgery she'd had done, and she said my parents paid for it all to make her feel good. I stopped moving because she said how much it cost. And it was almost all the money my parents said was for me. I left without saying a word, and that night I asked my parents if it was true, but they didn't even try to hide it. They told me my cousin had been insecure for years and needed help more than I did, and giving her confidence was more important than helping me with school. They told me I'd be fine, but that night I packed my bag and left. I stayed on a friend's couch for a few weeks. I stopped talking to most family except my aunt, who my parents warned me to avoid, but I had nothing left to lose, so I went to her. I told her everything, and she listened quietly, but then she told me something I'd never heard before. She told me she needed money years ago for a life-threatening surgery, so she went to my parents for help, but they told her no because they were saving the money for my college, and she'd believed them just like I had. My parents gave the money to whoever they wanted to impress. It was never really for me. I was just the excuse. After that, I stayed close with my aunt, and she became the only real family I had. We spent holidays together and talked every week. Something I never had at home. I graduated. Left with debt, but I made it through. I found a job, got my own place, and started over. And then out of nowhere, my parents reached out because Dad lost his job and they couldn't pay their house bills. So they asked for a little help, and I told them I'd take care of it. And I did, but just not the way they thought. I rerouted the bills to a secret box, and I let the late notices pile up without paying anything. So the debt grew big. The night before they were supposed to be evicted, I told them I had accepted a new job and was moving out, and they told me they were proud of me, but they had no idea what was coming. The next morning someone knocked on the door and I wasn't there, but I knew they saw a red eviction notice telling them to get out. I knew the panic they felt because I'd felt it once too. They tried to call me, but I didn't answer because I was done, and now they knew what it felt like to be left with nothing. Story 6. When I was 10, my dad promised he'd never drink again. I still remember that night. Mom was crying in the kitchen. Dad had missed my basketball championship because he passed out at his friend's house. I swear on my life, buddy. No more drinking. Not a single drop. For 2 whole months. Things were awesome. Dad came home right after work. He taught me to fish at the lake on weekends. Mom started smiling again. She even let me stay up late on Fridays to watch movies with him. Then came my birthday. I was turning 11. Dad said he was planning something special. The morning of my birthday I woke up super excited. Ran downstairs in my pajamas. No Dad. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table staring at her phone. "Where's Dad?" I asked. She just shook her head. My birthday party was at 3 p.m. By 2 he still wasn't home. Mom kept calling him, leaving messages. I heard her voice get shakier each time. My friends started arriving. Mom put on a brave face, ordered pizza, handed out party hats. I kept watching the door. By cake time I knew he wasn't coming. I could smell the alcohol on him before he even walked in at 7 p.m. After everyone had left. "Sorry, buddy. Lost track of time," he slurred. My unopened present from him sat on the table. That became our new normal. Dad would disappear for days. Sometimes he'd come home sober, full of apologies and promises. "This time is different," he'd say. It never was. When I was 13, I broke my arm falling off my bike. Mom was at work. I called Dad 5 times from the neighbor's phone. He never picked up. Mrs. Klein from next door drove me to the hospital. Dad showed up the next morning, hungover, panicking. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked. I just stared at him until he looked away. By high school I stopped expecting him at games or parent-teacher conferences. Mom always came alone, looking tired but trying her best. The night before my 16th birthday, Dad showed up sober. He sat on the edge of my bed. "I've got a surprise for tomorrow," he said. "I'm taking the day off work. Just you and me." I knew better than to get excited, but a small part of me still hoped. Morning came. No Dad. His side of the bed hadn't been slept in. Mom found him passed out in his truck in the driveway at noon. That evening while he was sleeping it off, I found old fishing photos from those 2 good months when I was 10. I cut myself out of the pictures and left them on his nightstand. At 18 I got accepted to college 3 states away. Full scholarship. When I told Mom, she hugged me tight. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. The night before I left, Dad came to my room, sober, clean-shaven, eyes clear. "I know I messed up," he said, "but I'm getting help. Real help this time. When you come home for Thanksgiving, things will be different." I nodded, but I'd stopped believing him years ago. 2 months into college, Mom called. Dad had checked himself into rehab. "He's really trying this time," she said. Thanksgiving came. I took the bus home, prepared for disappointment. Dad was waiting at the station, clear-eyed, 90 days sober. Throughout the weekend I kept waiting for the mask to slip. It didn't. He had chips from his AA meetings. A sponsor who called daily. He'd fixed up my old room. When it was time to leave, he hugged me awkwardly. "I know you don't believe me anymore," he said. "I don't blame you, but I'm going to show up this time." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Every Sunday after that, Dad called. Not once did he miss. He never asked for forgiveness, just told me about his day, asked about my classes. At Christmas, 6 months sober. Spring break, 9 months. For my 19th birthday, a card arrived with a fishing license. If you want, the note read. I didn't go fishing with him that summer or the next, but I kept every card, every milestone chip he sent. Last month I graduated college. As I walked across the stage, I spotted him in the crowd. 5 years sober now. After the ceremony, he didn't rush over. He waited until I came to him. "I'm proud of you, son," he said. "I know, Dad," I replied, and for the first time in years, I believed him. Some promises take a lifetime to keep. Some take a lifetime to break. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they can be remade. Story 7. I was always the difficult child, restless, emotional, and struggling in school. When I was 7, after a particularly rough parent-teacher conference, my mom took me to a doctor who asked me some questions while she spoke privately with my mother in the hallway. The next morning, Mom presented me with what she called special vitamins that would help me focus better and not feel so overwhelmed. They came in different colors and doses over the years, but they were always part of my daily routine. "These are just to help your brain work the way it's supposed to," she'd say whenever I questioned taking them. Like glasses help people see better, the pills seemed to work. I became calmer, more focused, and my grades improved dramatically. By high school, I was an honor roll student. Though I sometimes felt oddly disconnected or emotionally numb, I attributed it to normal teenage feelings. When I turned 18 and left for college, Mom sent me off with a semester supply of my vitamins and the promise that she'd refill my prescription and mail it to me. "Don't ever miss a dose," she warned. "You won't like how you feel." During my second semester, a postal strike delayed my package of pills for over a week. By day 3 without them, I was experiencing intense dizziness, extreme mood swings, and uncontrollable crying. Terrified, I went to the campus health center. The doctor looked confused when I described my vitamins and asked for their specific name. I realized I didn't know. I'd just always taken what my mother gave me. I called her from the doctor's office, putting her on speaker. "What are my vitamins called? The doctor needs to know." After a long pause, my mother said, "It's a combination of risperidone and Lexapro." The campus doctor's expression changed instantly. She asked my mother a series of increasingly specific questions about dosage and when I'd started taking them. With each answer, I watched the doctor's face grow more concerned. When the call ended, she explained that I wasn't taking vitamins. I'd been on a powerful antipsychotic and an SSRI antidepressant for more than a decade. "Did you know you were diagnosed with anything?" she asked gently. I hadn't. My mother had never mentioned any diagnosis, any therapy sessions, or that I was taking psychiatric medication. I'd been medicated for over half my life without understanding what I was taking or why. Story 8. After my sister, Sarah, lost her life to a drunk driver, the sound of our house died with her. The laughter vanished. My dad, a quiet accountant, became a ghost. His promise came on the day the verdict was read. The man responsible for her death, a real estate mogul named Richard, got 6 months probation, a slap on the wrist. My dad didn't rage. He just turned to me outside the courthouse, his face like stone, and made his promise. "The courts failed us," he said, his voice flat and cold. "But I won't." For years, I thought it was just the empty words of a grieving father. He withdrew into his study, the door always shut. He missed my high school graduation. He forgot my 18th birthday. He was a shell, a hollow man haunted by grief, and what I thought was a powerless rage. I'd sometimes see stacks of financial reports and newspaper clippings about Richard on his desk. I just assumed it was his way of obsessing, of torturing himself with the success of the man who had destroyed our family. I learned to live with it. I grieved for 2 people, my dead sister, and the father I had lost to his own sorrow. I was wrong. He wasn't lost. He was hunting. On the 10th anniversary of Sarah's death, to the day, Richard's empire imploded. It was on every news channel. A massive, anonymous data leak. Decades of tax evasion. Illegal backroom deals. Mistresses paid for with corporate funds. All laid bare in a meticulously organized dossier sent to the IRS and every major news outlet in the state. His life was surgically dismantled in the public square. He was ruined, utterly and completely. That night, I went to my dad's study. The door was unlocked for the first time in a decade. He was sitting in his chair, staring at a single photo of Sarah. The room was clean, stripped bare of all the papers and clippings. It was over. He didn't need to say a word. I knew, all those years, he wasn't declining. He was digging. Every missed birthday, every vacant stare, was a sacrifice to this single, cold purpose. He had spent 10 years of his life building a weapon out of information, and he had just fired it. He kept his promise. He got justice for Sarah. But in the process, he had burned away his own soul, leaving me an orphan twice over. Story 9. When I was diagnosed with cancer at 16, my parents promised they'd be with me through every treatment. Mom even took a leave of absence from work. Dad rearranged his entire schedule. The first few weeks they were there for everything. The hair loss, the vomiting, the nights I couldn't sleep because of the pain. Mom would read to me like when I was little, and Dad would sneak in my favorite snacks that the hospital technically didn't allow. Then something changed. I noticed Dad started having meetings during my treatments. Mom would show up late, already looking exhausted. Soon their excuses piled up faster than the medical bills on our kitchen counter. 3 months in, I was sitting alone in the chemo chair when my nurse asked where my parents were. I lied and said they were grabbing lunch. The truth? Dad was at work, and Mom was home because seeing me like this had become too depressing for her. I remember staring at the poison dripping into my veins, realizing I was more afraid of being alone than dying. That night I overheard Mom crying to Dad in the kitchen, not about my health, but about how hard this was for them. I learned to take myself to appointments, made friends with the elderly patients whose families actually showed up, started telling doctors I was 18 so my parents wouldn't have to sign anything. They didn't even notice when I stopped asking them to come. Story 10. My parents destroyed my sister's dying wish, but they had no idea I was about to make them pay for it in the most unexpected way. When my sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer at 23, my parents made her one final promise. She could spend her last days in our childhood home, surrounded by memories, and they would never sell it. They swore on her life that the house would always be there to honor her memory. After she passed, that house became my sanctuary. I'd sit in her room for hours, surrounded by her books and artwork, feeling like she was still there with me. It was the only place where the grief felt manageable. 6 months later, I pulled into the driveway and saw something that made my blood run cold. A for sale sign was planted in our front yard like a dagger through my heart. My parents had received a cash offer too good to refuse, and planned to close the deal before telling me. They were going to present it as a done deal, eliminate any chance for me to object. I felt something break inside me that day. Not just sadness, pure, calculated rage. What they didn't know was that my grandparents had left me a substantial inheritance that I'd never touched. Within 48 hours, I contacted a lawyer and set up an LLC under a fake business name. I submitted a cash offer 20% above asking price with a 72-hour close. My parents were thrilled about the mysterious buyer who wanted to close so quickly. They bragged about getting even more money than expected. The closing happened on a Friday. On Monday morning, I showed up at the house and changed every single lock. That's when I called them and explained that their daughter, the one whose dying wish they'd betrayed for money, was now their landlord. The house would never be sold. My sister's room would never be touched. They can drive by anytime they want, but they'll never step foot inside again. Story 11. For 15 years, my father promised me that our family restaurant would be mine someday. I believed him. I sacrificed everything. My social life, my education, my relationships, working 80-hour weeks building something I thought would be my legacy. While my friends went to college, I was managing inventory. While they dated and traveled, I was perfecting recipes and learning every aspect of the business. My ex-fiancée left me because I was always at the restaurant. But I didn't care. I thought I was building my future. On my father's 65th birthday, he announced his retirement. I was ready. I had business plans, expansion ideas, everything mapped out. Then he introduced the new owner. It was my ex-fiancée. The same man who left me because the restaurant consumed my life had just bought my life's work. My father sold it to him behind my back, claiming he had a better business mind and would take it to the next level. I stood there in shock as they shook hands over the dream they'd stolen from me. But they made one critical mistake. The recipes that made our restaurant special weren't written down anywhere. They were passed down from my grandmother directly to me, not to my father. The secret spice blends, the sauce ratios, the techniques that made people drive across town. All of that lived in my head. 6 months later, I opened my own place directly across the street. Same recipes, better execution, lower prices. Within a year, I've stolen 70% of their customers. Their Yelp reviews are tanking. The health inspector has become very interested in their kitchen practices after receiving several anonymous tips. My father calls me crying about bankruptcy while I'm expanding to a second location. My ex-fiancée is learning that buying a restaurant means nothing if you can't cook the food that made it famous. They broke their promise to the one person who knew all their secrets. Now they're watching me use those secrets to bury them. Story 12. I was 14 when Dad promised we'd never move again. "This is our forever home," he said, Hanging the family photo on our wall after 6 moves in 8 years, I finally believed him. I started high school that fall. For the first time I made real friends. Not the see you when I visit kind, but the come over after school kind. I joined debate team, got cast in the musical. Mom planted a garden. Dad joined a softball league. Then came the company dinner. Dad's boss pulled me aside. Your father's being promoted. You must be proud. My stomach dropped. Where's the new position? I asked. Chicago. He beamed. We lived in Phoenix. That night I heard them arguing. You promised her, Mom said. We promised her. Dad corrected. It's just one more move. The last one. When they told me, Dad had a PowerPoint ready. Better schools, higher salary, company paid moving. And he said, sliding a brochure across the table, the house has a pool. I didn't speak to him for 3 days. My friends threw me a goodbye party. My debate coach gave me her email. You could go to nationals next year, she said. I nodded, knowing I'd never compete with this team again. The night before moving, I watched Mom water her half-grown tomatoes. Someone else will enjoy them, she said, voice cracking. Chicago was cold. Our new house felt empty. At school everyone had their friend groups. I ate lunch alone, texting Phoenix friends who responded less each day. Dad worked later hours. The promotion comes with more responsibility, he explained. Mom got a job at a florist because the cost of living is higher here. I made one friend, Zoe. She introduced me to her theater friends. I got a small role in the fall play. Things were looking up. Then came career day. Dad was supposed to speak. I saved him a seat. He never showed. Emergency meeting with the CEO. That night Dad brought home Chinese food and an apology. I'll make it up to you, he promised. 2 weeks later he missed my performance for a business dinner. In December I overheard him on the phone. It would only be for 2 years. 3 max, he said. The London office needs someone who understands the American market. My heart stopped. I burst into his office. We're not moving to London, I said, shaking. Dad looked guilty. It's just an opportunity I'm considering, he said. Nothing's decided, but I'd seen this before. The consideration, the decision, the PowerPoint, the move. That night I called Grandma in Arizona. Can I live with you? I asked. Is everything okay? She asked. I told her everything. I left a letter on the kitchen counter. I laid out every broken promise, every missed event, every just one more time. I ended with, I'm staying in the United States with or without you. At dinner, Mom cried. Dad defended himself. These opportunities are for our family, he insisted. So we can give you the best life. The best life was the one where you kept your promise, I said. The argument lasted for weeks. Dad turned down London for now, but I knew what that meant. On my 16th birthday, instead of the car they'd promised, my parents gave me a passport. Just in case, Dad said. I applied to boarding school secretly. Got accepted in Arizona with a scholarship. When I showed them the letter, Dad looked betrayed. You'd leave your family? He asked. You taught me how, I answered. I moved back to Arizona that fall. Live with Grandma on weekends. Mom visits monthly. Dad calls every Sunday, though we rarely talk more than 10 minutes. Last week he called with news. They've offered me London again, he said carefully. We're considering it. I looked at my stable life, my debate trophies, photos of friends I've known for 2 years. That's nice, I said. I hope you send postcards. Sometimes the biggest promise broken isn't just the words, it's the life you thought you were going to have. Story 13. They promised they'd never lie to me about money. Growing up, every request was met with the same response. We can't afford it. New backpack for school? Can't afford it. School field trip? Sorry, money's tight. Even a $3 candy bar at the grocery store checkout got a headshake and put it back. I learned early to stop asking. When other kids got new clothes for the school year, I wore hand-me-downs from cousins. When friends went to movies, I stayed home. By high school I had internalized it completely. We were the poor family. Dad worked construction. Mom cleaned houses. Every bill was a struggle. Every expense was carefully calculated. I got a job at 15 busing tables just to buy my own school supplies. I never questioned it. Never doubted their word. Until the laptop incident. I was 15 and needed to finish a history report. Dad's laptop was on the kitchen table, still logged into everything. I opened a browser to research my paper when I saw the tab. His banking app was still open. My heart stopped. Checking account, $23,000. Savings account, $157,000. Investment account, $89,000. I stared at those numbers for 10 minutes, refreshing the page, thinking it was a mistake, but there it was. Nearly $270,000 just sitting there while I'd been wearing the same 3 shirts to school for 2 years. I confronted them that night at dinner. Why do we live like we're broke when we're not? Dad barely looked up from his meatloaf. That money's not for spending. It's for emergencies and your college fund. But I've been working since I was 15 to buy basic things. Builds character. Mom interrupted. You'll thank us when you're older. I accepted it. Figured they knew best. The money was there, just not for everyday stuff. I kept working, kept saving, kept living like we were one paycheck from disaster. Senior year changed everything. I got into my dream school since middle school. Full journalism program. Perfect campus. Everything I'd worked toward. Tuition was $58,000 a year. I applied for every scholarship imaginable. Wrote essays until my fingers cramped. Got 3 part-time jobs that summer. Saved every penny from my restaurant work since sophomore year. By August I had $35,000 in scholarship money and $8,000 in savings. Still needed $15,000 for the first year. I sat my parents down with all my paperwork, showing them my budget, my loan options, everything. I just need help with this gap. I can handle the rest. Dad looked at the numbers for maybe 30 seconds. We just don't have it, sweetie, Mom said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Maybe community college for 2 years. Then transfer. I felt sick. All that money sitting in accounts and they wouldn't help with my education. But I accepted it. Started filling out loan applications for the full amount. 3 weeks later, my cousin Emma posted Instagram photos from her graduation trip to Europe. Not just any trip. A month-long adventure through Italy, France, and Spain. 5-star hotels. The works. I called her that night. That trip looks incredible. How'd you swing it? Oh, Uncle Mike helped out, she said casually. Mom mentioned I really wanted to go and he just offered to cover it. Said family should support each other's dreams. Uncle Mike. My dad. My hands were shaking as I hung up. I found Emma's mom's Facebook and scrolled through her posts. There it was. A public thank you post to Mike and Linda for making Emma's dream trip possible. Posted 2 days after my parents told me they couldn't help with college. I called my uncle directly. Hey kiddo, what's up? Just curious about Emma's trip. Mom said you helped out? Yeah. Your dad actually suggested it. Said Emma had worked so hard in school. Deserves something special. Think it ran about 15 grand. But worth every penny to see her happy. $15,000. The exact amount I needed. I walked into the living room where Dad was watching the evening news. Didn't say anything at first. Just stood there until he felt my stare and looked up. It's different, he said quietly before I could speak. Yeah, I replied. Emma's dreams were worth investing in. I took out student loans for 4 years. Never asked them for another cent. Story 14. My parents promised me when I was 8 that if I got straight A's all year, they'd take me to Disney World for my 9th birthday. I worked harder than I'd ever worked. Studying every night, doing extra credit, even missing playtime with friends. I got straight A's the entire school year. 2 weeks before my birthday, my parents sat me down and said they'd spent the Disney money on my baby brother's medical bills, and we couldn't afford the trip anymore. Instead, they took me to a local carnival that smelled like vomit and had rides held together with duct tape. I was obsessed with Disney World from my first Disney movie. When my parents made the promise in September, I was the happiest kid alive. If you can get all A's this year, we'll take you to Disney World for your birthday, my dad said. But it has to be all A's. Kiddo. No B's allowed. My mom nodded enthusiastically. We've already started saving money for it. But you have to hold up your end. I was a decent student, mostly getting B's. But straight A's meant I had to completely change everything. I studied every night. Even when I didn't have homework. I'd review notes, read ahead, and ask for extra credit assignments. My friends started calling me a nerd during recess while they played kickball. I sat inside finishing math worksheets. When they invited me to sleepovers, I'd decline because I had studying to do. My social life disappeared, but I didn't care. Disney World was worth any sacrifice. Each report card was a victory. First quarter. Straight A's. My parents were amazed. Keep it up, honey, my mom said. Disney World. Here we come. Second quarter. Straight A's again. My dad started showing my report card to neighbors. Look at our little scholar. He'd beam with pride. The pressure was intense, but so was my excitement. I'd watch Disney commercials and imagine myself there. I started making lists of rides I wanted to go on. My room was covered with Disney pictures I'd printed from the library computer. Fourth quarter came and I was exhausted but determined. When the final report card came in June, I raced to see my grades. Straight A's. I'd done it. I ran home screaming. I did it! I got all A's! We're going to Disney World. My parents seemed happy but oddly subdued. That's wonderful, honey, my mom said, but she didn't seem nearly as excited as I expected. My birthday was 2 weeks away. I started counting down the days, talking about nothing but Disney World. Then came the devastating conversation. My parents called me into the living room with serious expressions. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about your birthday trip," my dad said. "When are we leaving for Disney?" I asked eagerly. My mom's eyes filled with tears. "Your baby brother's had health problems. The doctor bills were expensive and we had to use the Disney money for his treatment." It felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "What do you mean? We can't afford Disney World right now," my dad said. "But we're taking you somewhere special. A traveling carnival's coming to town." I started crying, sobbing that makes your whole body shake. All that work, all those sacrifices, gone. "You promised," I whispered through tears. "You said if I got straight A's we'd go." "I did everything." "We know, sweetheart. And we're so sorry," my mom said. "Sometimes adult responsibilities have to come first." "But you promised," I screamed. "I gave up everything. I lost my friends. I studied every single day. I never even went outside." My birthday weekend arrived and they took me to the carnival. It was everything I'd feared. Sketchy rides, greasy food, and carnival workers who looked like they hadn't showered in weeks. The funhouse was a trailer with broken mirrors and a smell I couldn't identify. I tried to have fun for my parents' sake, but every colorful light reminded me of Disney's parades. Every ride reminded me of Space Mountain instead of Mickey Mouse. I got my picture taken with a teenager in a dirty tiger costume who smelled like cigarettes and body spray. The worst part was going back to school and explaining why I didn't go to Disney World. My teacher looked embarrassed when I said carnival. That broken promise changed everything. I never fully trusted them again. When they made promises, I'd think, yeah, until something else comes up. Story 15. When I was 9, Dad promised we'd always be a family. 2 weeks later, he packed his truck at midnight while I pretended to sleep. Mom said he'd be back for my birthday. I waited by the window all day, watching cars turn down our street. None were his. For 3 years, Dad would call randomly. "I'm coming to get you this weekend, buddy." I'd pack my backpack with my favorite comics and wait on the porch steps, sometimes for hours. By 13, I stopped packing. By 14, I stopped answering his calls. Mom worked 2 jobs. Our fridge was always empty except for ketchup packets and expired milk. One night I found her crying over bills at the kitchen table. Red notices everywhere. The next day I lied about my age and got hired washing dishes at the diner down the street. $5.25 an hour under the table. My hands were always pruny and smelled like old food. On my 16th birthday, a fancy car pulled into our driveway. Dad stepped out wearing an expensive watch and new boots. "Surprise," he said, arms wide open. He took me to dinner, bragging about his new job, new wife, new kids in Arizona. Then he slid a birthday card across the table. Inside was $200 and a note. "Sorry for missing so much." I stared at the money, thinking about Mom's second job, our shut-off notices, my pruny hands. "I want to make it up to you," he said. "How about you come live with me? Swimming pool, your own room." I folded the money and put it in my pocket. "Can I think about it?" That night I gave Mom the $200. Story 16. They promised they wouldn't choose favorites. I was 8 when I first noticed it. My brother failed a math test. He got ice cream to cheer him up. I got an A and a, "That's what we expect from you." At first I thought maybe I was just imagining it. But it got worse. He crashed the car. He's going through a lot. I missed curfew by 10 minutes. Grounded for a week. Every time I tried to speak up, I was told I was being dramatic or jealous or too sensitive. The final straw was my high school graduation. I looked out into the crowd and saw my mom checking her watch, my dad scrolling his phone. My brother showed up late and they lit up like he was the one on stage. They didn't even take a photo with me. That night I sat in my room holding the empty frame they gave me as a gift. "For your big moments." But somehow mine never felt big enough. I left for college and stopped coming home for holidays. No big fight. Just silence. I stopped updating them on wins because they never asked. Years later my mom asked why I seemed so distant. I said, "You promised not to pick favorites. You just forgot to include me in the choice." Now they frame my brother's wedding photos. My frame's still empty. It wasn't about attention. It was about being worth the same rules, the same cheers, the same love. Story 17. My parents promised me a car for my 16th birthday. They said they'd been saving money for it since I was a kid. Whenever I asked for stuff like a new bike or a trip to the fun park, they'd say, "No, that money's for your car. Wait for it." I believed them. Didn't spend my pocket money and even cut grass to help out. Dreaming of driving to school. I counted the days. But when I turned 16, they just gave me a card. No car, no reason. Just, "Sorry, we're short on cash." I was stunned. They acted like it was no big deal and told me to take the bus. All that waiting for nothing. I got a job at a diner. Saved every penny for an old beater. Then at my uncle's barbecue, my cousin shows off a shiny new truck, says my parents bought it for him after he crashed his last one. It cost what they'd promised me. I left, asked them about it. They said he needed it more to fix his life. I was mad, stayed at a friend's and stopped talking to them. My aunt, who they never liked, let me move in. When I told her, she said she'd once asked them for roof money and they gave her the same car fund excuse. It was fake. They just used it to say no. Me and my aunt got close, had our own holidays. I bought a junk car, eventually moved out. Then Dad lost his job, and they begged me for rent money. I said I'd take care of it, but I sent their bills to a secret box and let them stack up. The day before they got kicked out, I said I was moving for a new job. They were proud, didn't know an eviction notice was coming. I didn't answer their calls. Now they know how it feels to lose something you were promised. Story 18. It was a sacred pact, whispered over hospital beds and during late-night fevers since I was a little kid. I was born with a bad kidney, a ticking clock inside me, and they always promised, if the day ever comes, we're right here. One of us will save you. That day came when I was 22. My body was finally giving out. The world had turned a hazy, exhausted yellow. And then, a miracle. The tests came back. Not one, but both of my parents were perfect matches. I remember crying with relief, feeling this overwhelming wave of love. The safety net I had been promised my entire life was real. It was going to catch me. A week before the surgery, the first call came. It was my father. His voice was distant, clinical. He talked about new health concerns and doctor's advice. He was backing out. A few hours later, my mother called, echoing the same vague, cowardly excuse. The safety net had vanished. I was in free fall. My life was saved by my partner's brother, a man who barely knew me but didn't hesitate for a second. He gave me his kidney. My parents sent a flower arrangement to the hospital with a card full of hollow apologies. I tried to understand. I told myself they were scared of the surgery, that their fear was bigger than their promise. I could almost forgive fear, but it wasn't fear that made them break their promise. It was a calculation. A year later, at a forced family Christmas party, the truth came out. My younger brother, the golden child, had a little too much to drink. I overheard him laughing, bragging to our cousin. He was telling a story, a little family secret he found impressive. He told our cousin how our parents had confessed the real reason to him. Their health concerns were a lie. They had both decided to withdraw their donation because they were saving their spare kidneys. They were saving them for him, just in case he ever needed one in the future. The air left my lungs. It wasn't about them. It was about us. They had looked at their two children, one who was actively dying and one who was perfectly healthy, and they made a choice. They chose to preserve a hypothetical backup plan for their favorite over the guaranteed survival of their other child. They didn't just break a promise to save me. They made an active decision to let me die. I look at the scar on my side every single day, and it's a constant reminder, not of the surgery, but of the moment I learned that in my own family's life or death equation, I was the one they were willing to subtract. Story 19. My entire childhood was the scent of rosin and the weight of a violin tucked under my chin. My father, a failed musician himself, poured all his broken dreams into me. He was my biggest cheerleader, driving me to lessons 4 times a week, spending money we didn't have on fine Italian instruments. He promised he would always support my dream, that he would help me get to the places he never could. When I was 18, I did it. I earned a full scholarship audition to Juilliard. This wasn't just an audition. It was the culmination of my entire existence. It was every sacrificed party, every summer spent in a practice room, every bleeding fingertip. It was our dream. The night before, my father made me my favorite meal as a good luck dinner. He told me how proud he was, his eyes shining. I went to bed feeling loved and ready. I woke up at 3 a.m. in agony, a violent, world-ending sickness that left me unable to stand. The cramps were so bad I couldn't even hold my violin, let alone play. I had to forfeit my spot. It was given to the runner-up. I was devastated, but my dad held me and told me it just wasn't meant to be. For years, I believed it was just cruel fate. I grieved the dream that died from a simple stomach flu. But the real betrayal wasn't that he failed to support me. It was that he never was. 10 years later, my parents were selling their house. I was helping my dad clean out the attic, a dusty graveyard of memories. I found a box of his old journals. Curious, I opened one. I flipped to the date of my audition, and the world tilted on its axis. There, in his familiar handwriting, was the entry. He wrote about the good luck dinner. He described, in calm, methodical detail, how he had ground up a small dose of a powerful laxative and mixed it into my food. He wrote that he couldn't bear the thought of sitting in an audience, watching me succeed where he had failed. He couldn't stand the idea of becoming just another parent in the crowd. The air in the attic grew thick, and I couldn't breathe. Every memory of his support, the long drives, the expensive violins, the proud smiles, was instantly poisoned. They weren't acts of love. They were the grooming of a dream he never intended to let me achieve. He didn't just break his promise of support, he actively sabotaged me, poisoning his own child, all to soothe his pathetic, fragile ego. He wasn't my biggest fan. He was my first and greatest saboteur.